The following podcast is a presentation of This Is Infamous. Listener discretion is advised.
What's going on, ladies and gentlemen? Brand new episode of Intelligent Wrestling Conversation coming at you. That's right, the IWC podcast is back. And I feel like we just spoke to each other not too long ago. I'm your host, as always, Billy Donnelly. Tom Nix has the week off, so save your homework. I know you did it early because you're a good student, but save your homework for next week. That's right, from the New Japan Pro Wrestling G1 special in USA. Make sure you take Ishii versus Kenny Omega. Stick it in your back pocket. I know you did all your prep work already, and we're going to talk about that next week. So, Tom, we wish you well. Crazy schedule. We're unable to make it work this week. But that's okay, because goodness gracious, great balls of fire happened this weekend in the WWE. We're going to get to that in just a little bit. I got a very special guest. Matt Fowler from IGN will be joining me on this week's show to talk about Great Balls of Fire. But before we get into that, before we even get into the pay-per-view, the special event that took place in the WWE Universe just before the weekend broke, we had big WWE news coming down the pike that I wanted to at least kick off the show with now, before we get into Great Balls of Fire. So the first thing was that early on Friday, last Friday of last week, we got news that Austin Aries, that's right, the greatest man who ever lived, had been released from his WWE contract. Now, a lot of people would wonder, why would you possibly do this? Why would Austin Aries possibly get released from the WWE? And look, there's a number of reasons for that relationship to have not worked out. I feel terrible for Austin Aries because I know that this was a great opportunity for him to sort of make a name for him in the mainstream after having already sort of carved his path through TNA and some of the indies and the long route that he took to get to where he is at this point in his life and his career. But a couple of things regarding Austin Aries' time in the WWE and that we can look at and say maybe this is a good thing that he's not now involved with the WWE. Number one, Austin Aries was the victim of really bad timing when it came to his arrival in the WWE. Let's not forget, and I was there the first night that Austin Aries debuted. That was at one of the NXT tapings at the University of Central Florida. So it was a bigger venue than what they had at Full Sail. And he came in with a lot of fanfare, having left TNA, Impact Wrestling, at that point in time. The problem with that was that, and there wasn't a problem initially, however, when Austin Aries came in, it was like just before Shinsuke Nakamura was also coming into NXT at that point in time. And there was a lot of talent at that point in time in NXT. You had Kevin Owens was there, Finn Balor was there, and unfortunately for Austin Aries, it was just the wrong time, because as good and as talented as Austin Aries is, he was just overshadowed by the largeness of this other group of talent that was also coming in around the same time. So unfortunately for Austin Aries, it was very easy for him to be overlooked it was very easy for him to not be seen at that top tier of talent in NXT. Somewhat similar to what Hideo Itami has been going through. His a little bit different because of his injury, but once again, he also came in at the wrong time. He came in at a time when Finn Balor was arriving. He came in at a time when Samoa Joe was arriving. And as a result, Hideo Itami, as we've talked about on this podcast before, sort of got lost in the shuffle. Austin Aries, a victim of very similar circumstance. So as a result, during his time in NXT, he just was not seen by the right people who were, for good reason, I would say, drawn to some of the other bigger, more exciting, more glitzy, glamorous names, the names that sparkled a little bit more than what Austin Aries was at that point in time. And look, don't get me wrong, I like Austin Aries. I've come to really respect the hell out of Austin Aries, and I appreciate everything that Austin Aries has done to sort of get to this point in his life. But let's face it, some people are way up here, and some people are just a little bit below on the hierarchy. And that's not a knock on Austin Aries. It's just that's the way it is. You wouldn't put Heath Slater on the same plane as Okada at this point in time. It's not a knock on Heath Slater. It's just when you say their names, they don't really compete fairly with one another. So that's one thing in terms of Austin Aries' development in the WWE machine. The injury that he suffered in a match with Shinsuke Nakamura, the result of that strong style, didn't do him any favors. But I thought what Austin Aries really did was show himself to be sort of a key component of what they could use him for. I thought that he showed himself to be valuable in terms of not just in the ring, because when he got hurt, he was moved into the commentary and he was calling action as part of 205 Live. And I thought with him getting on the mic and getting his own character over, having now left NXT, I thought he showed, look, I can hang with the big boys. You give me the stick and I can talk. I have personality. I can make people hate me. I can make people love me. I can make people believe in me. So I thought in that respect, the injury might not have been too bad for him, because he did take the opportunity given to him to sort of stay on TV and make the most of it. And I thought that was going to benefit him really in the long run. Now look, through WrestleMania and out of WrestleMania, he had a longer program with Neville fighting for the Cruiserweight Championship. But that, I think, is really, that was sort of the downfall of Austin Aries in the WWE. Number one, the WWE creative team has no idea whatsoever what to do with the Cruiserweights at this point in time. Just none. No idea. 205 Live, while it has had some solid matches, story-wise and even just programming-wise, in terms of drawing eyes to what they're doing there, has just been an absolute disaster. They just have not been able to get this show off the ground and make people care about it. One, there's just a lot of programming in the WWE for people to watch anyway, that just another hour of just cruiserweights, I don't really think is a solid selling point for the fan base to tune in solely just to watch cruiserweight action. But on top of that, it's been treated as such an afterthought. And that goes back to it sort of being a part of Monday Night Raw, exclusive to Monday Night Raw. Monday Night Raw does not know what to do with the cruiserweights. They stick like 2 matches on one of their shows. Some of it is just for wrestling's sake, just to sort of fill time. And without really taking the time on that flagship broadcast to make people care about these personalities, to make people care about these feuds, to make people have any sort of emotional investment whatsoever in what any of these cruiserweights are doing, has been just terrible execution. They have not done it. So why would you go and tune in on a Tuesday night after you've already sort of watched 2 hours of SmackDown to watch more wrestling that just does not draw your interest, because Monday night has done nothing to bring you over to that other show. So look, so he gets into this feud with Neville, and it's fine, and it's probably the best work that Aries had done since he got into the WWE. But because they have no idea what to do with the cruiserweights, once he's finished with that Neville feud, guess what? They have no idea what to do with Austin Aries. None whatsoever. They have no idea what to do with him. Because, first off, Austin Aries is only in the cruiserweight division. He's only a 205 liver because you made him. He's so much bigger than that. Much like Neville is probably so much bigger than that. But by sort of cramming a ceiling down on top of them, by putting limitations on a guy like Austin Aries, who really has no limits to what he is able to do, at least in ring, charismatically he can bring it. So by limiting a guy who has no limits and stifling that, I mean, that's just, it's oil and water. It doesn't go well together. It's not a good mix. It's not a good recipe. It's not a good match. And as a result, I'm sure Austin Aries was absolutely frustrated with his time since being called up from NXT, because he is not really a cruiserweight. Austin Aries has been a world champion before. And look, he's smaller. I get it. It would be, I'm sure that they looked at Austin Aries and said, well, we can only put him incredibly in the ring with certain people, because, if they put him in with Braun Strowman, it would look ridiculous, or he'd get killed, or whatever. Now, granted, you can make those matchups work if you really take the time to make them work. But as we've seen, the WWE is not necessarily booming when it comes to creating new stars. And that doesn't mean Austin Aries is necessarily a new guy. He's been around the block for quite some time. But when it comes to the WWE universe, those people are still largely in the dark, with a blind spot for somebody like Austin Aries, much like they were in the dark and had a blind spot for somebody like Samoa Joe. And it takes time to build that up, to invest in those talents so that the audience will also believe and invest in them. So, look, I wish that things had gone better for Austin Aries in the WWE, but as we've seen with people like Cody Rhodes, with people like Drew Galloway, sometimes leaving the WWE can be to your advantage. Look, as we talked about last week, Juice Robinson killing it right now outside of the WWE machine. So perhaps Austin Aries will go out and look, he's been around the world, he's done a lot of things. Maybe this is his chance to just sort of go out and do what's fulfilling to him. Do what sort of tugs at him. Do what he would like to do. Cross out those bucket list items, much like Cody Rhodes did when he was sort of marching to the beat of his own drummer. And I'm sure that the money will keep pouring in for Austin Aries. I'm sure he may actually wind up doing better outside of the WWE than he was doing in the WWE. He got to WrestleMania. I'm sure that was a dream come true. I'm sure that was one that he could cross off. He did get to the show, quote unquote, so I'm sure that's something cool that he was able to do. Now he can just sort of go line by line by line and figure out what sort of jazzes him. And I think we'll see a happier, I think we'll see a more satisfied, and I think we'll see just an Austin Aries at his best when he's sort of able to do the things that Austin Aries wants to do. There's been speculation that he could go to Japan and join up with the Bullet Club. The Bullet Club might not turn away someone who could sort of move into the junior heavyweight division for them and maybe compete for the IWGP Intercontinental Championship. That may fit into Austin Aries' sort of niche. I'm not saying that that's going to happen, but it is something I've heard some rumblings about and some speculation, and fans seem to be behind. So look, there's still plenty of future for Austin Aries outside of the WWE. So while it sucks that we're not going to see him around anymore, people aren't watching him on 205 Live anyway, so it's probably better off that he's out there in the world. He could do his own thing, and Godspeed to him. So look, that was the one order of business that happened within the WWE universe before the turn of the week. And then there was also one other item that was pretty exciting and pretty fascinating for a lot of fans, and that was the crowning of a new United States champion. And you'll say, but Billy, SmackDown wasn't on Great Balls of Fire. That was a Raw exclusive pay-per-view. And there was no Raw or SmackDown show for that to transpire on. And I would say you're absolutely right. But this is where the air of uncertainty comes in and surprises all of us. Because at Madison Square Garden during a house show, AJ Styles defeated Kevin Owens to capture the United States Championship. Now, that's cool as hell. And it's one of those things where it's another reason why people should go to house shows. Look, I get it. It's not on TV, so you think that it's not that important. Lots of people have that perception. They think, well, it's not televised, so whatever. Nothing of importance is going to happen. It's just going to be sort of matches I've seen before, and so what? The difference is, if you love wrestling, you should be going to house shows, because that's where you're seeing some of the best stuff. I mean, pay-per-views are great and all, and you'll see people elevate to these matches that a lot of hype is put into. But when you go to a house show, as opposed to going to a Raw or a SmackDown, you're getting to see nothing but pure wrestling. You're not seeing 15-minute long-winded rambling promos. You're seeing guys get into the ring. They're having a lot of fun because they have leeway to have good matches and experiment and do some cool things. And if you like wrestling, that's the perfect place to go, is to a house show. Look, they're not going to change titles. Titles aren't going to change hands every single house show. Okay, it's not going to happen. So if you're going to a house show expecting, oh, maybe the title will change hands tonight, 9 times out of 10, it's probably not going to happen. In fact, I'd probably escalate that. It's probably like 9.8 or 9.9 times out of 10. That's not going to happen. But there's still those chances. There's still those little itty-bitty tiny chances that something might happen, as proven in the world's most famous arena, Madison Square Garden, where AJ Styles walked out, now with the United States Championship around his waist. So, a cool thing, once again, a reason for you to go to a house show, because you never know. But on top of that, there's always cool wrestling that's going on there. You get to see a lot of your favorites actually wrestle for longer than like 4 or 5 minutes that you would on a televised match. So a lot of times you'll see matches where guys are sort of working out their chemistry for a later match that may happen, for a match on pay-per-view. So go check those matches out. Go check those cards out. They are a lot of fun. I understand they're not televised, but sometimes you get a better show with the house shows than you would on a Raw or a SmackDown. So congratulations to AJ Styles. We'll see where that leads to as we head towards, I believe, Battleground is the next SmackDown exclusive pay-per-view. So, that is what it is. But some good news and some bad news on the WWE front. But once again, anything can happen at any good moment in this business. So congratulations to AJ Styles. Godspeed to Austin Aries. Let's talk Great Balls of Fire. All right, let's get to my guest right now, who's patiently waiting on the This Is Infamous hotline. Joining me now, at Intelligent Wrestling Conversation. You can find his work over at IGN. You could also find him on Twitter at the Matt Fowler. Here to talk to me about Great Balls of Fire, which still makes me laugh when I say it. The fantastic and great Matt Fowler. Matt, thank you very much, man, for taking the time out. You were in attendance in Dallas for Great Balls of Fire, were you not?
I was there. I was amongst the people watching the event, doing the thing here in Dallas for Great Balls. WWE balls, hashtag balls, hashtag fire, hashtag. Yeah, did it have to be? I mean, with the branding, they had the balls and they were on fire for the logo, for the Great Balls of Fire logo. Did it have to be two? I mean, I know it's plural because it's balls, but if they really didn't want people really making fun of it, did it have to just be two balls? They could have had many balls.
You know what? That is a very good point that I have not heard raised by anyone, which is that with it being
Literally
plural, yeah, why did you have to go full phallic?
Yeah, did it have to be like, you have to look at it and instantly think, gonads?
Yeah.
I mean, it did give us the gift of look, I'm 8 years old, so it's going to be funny when somebody is thrown headfirst into the balls, which Alexa Bliss was. Just face first right between the two testes. That was so deliberate. It had to be deliberate. But yeah, I was there. It was good, little lulls during the Iron Man match crowd-wise, but other than that, the crowd was super into it. We even survived it really didn't go down well live in the arena. I don't know how it came off on the network, but the impromptu ginger match that was meant to sort of like be there and while they brought out the jaws of life for the ambulance, which was just a big lull. People were leaving before the main event because got super boring.
Really?
Yeah. But but then everyone still was there. Everyone was still there. It was in reserve. The reserve tanks were there for the main event.
All right, well, let me get into sort of your impressions going into the card. This is a Raw exclusive pay-per-view. And as we know, Raw has a bit of a reputation right now for, dare I say, not being very good. So, with that said, what were your impressions, what were you thinking going into sort of Great Balls of Fire? What were you anticipating? And what were your feelings on the card overall, on paper at least?
I thought on paper it was actually a really good card. I think the consensus seemed to be dumb name, good card, like heading in. And I think there were matches I was looking forward to thanks to a lot of the work done by guys like Enzo and Cass and Joe, on his end, did his best to make this a really good, hotly anticipated match with Brock Lesnar. I don't think anyone was really expecting him to go over, but if you can plant a seed small enough to where people were like, maybe something can come from this match. Joe is really reaching for that brass ring, and I think, Roman and Braun have history. They had an excellent pay-per-view match the last time they met. So I think I was like, and Sasha and Alexa, it was a one-on-one straight up match with, if it wasn't Bayley, it was the other person you wanted facing Alexa at this moment, because I don't think they've figured out a way to make the Nia Jax thing work yet. I think I was looking forward to a lot of these matches. Again, though, the title, and then not just the title, because they picked a song, this Jerry Lee Lewis song. It has nothing to do with Texas or Dallas or really anything.
Or wrestling. Nothing.
Or anything that WWE is currently sort of like running parallel to. And then on top of that, we got sort of this, right at the beginning of the pay-per-view, a 50s sort of like drive-in movie theater theme, with the classic cars and the old concession stand ads and stuff like that. It was sort of this really strange branding. But aside from that, and it would be one thing if like there had been a Great Balls of Fire pay-per-view forever. Like this is a 10-year-old pay-per-view. This is something someone cooked up recently. This was just thought of. This was the first ever Great Balls of Fire pay-per-view. So it's even stranger that someone just came out of nowhere with this.
Yeah, I can't even imagine what the pitch meeting was like. Where it was like, we need to come up with a brand new name for a pay-per-view, and somebody threw great balls of fire at the wall, and Vince was like, that sounds great. Let's do it. And
it started with someone drawing a pair of balls, a pair of testicles on a like a marker board, and we're like, what can we do with this?
For all the criticism that the WWE and particularly Vince McMahon get for being sort of out of touch at times, Great Balls of Fire is probably about as out of touch as you could possibly get. Like, it's not modern at all. It's not recent. There's nothing hip or cool or edgy about it. And like you mentioned, the opening package is like very 50s, old-timey. And for the audience that's watching the WWE right now, they don't forget about remembering any of that. Half those people's parents weren't conceived of when that stuff was still around. So yeah, I agree with you. Very strange idea to brand the pay-per-view this and sort of double down on like nothing that has to do with wrestling or sports entertainment or any of the people that are involved, to call it a to call it Great Balls of Fire. Very, very odd. Very odd. And look, you were a little bit, I think, more optimistic than I was, because even in recent months with WWE pay-per-views, when they look good on paper, sometimes the execution is horrible. For example, Money in the Bank. So it is, look, it's a crapshoot right now with WWE pay-per-views. So, while you try to be hopefully optimistic, hope for the best and fear the worst, it's like a 50-50 shot when you get to a WWE pay-per-view being scheduled, especially with the builds.
Yeah, I think what we're in now is we're sort of a slave to the big four pay-per-views. And anything in between that isn't directly leading up to a WrestleMania match or a SummerSlam match or something happening with Rumble or Survivor Series, as much as they tried to make that a huge deal this past year, maybe they'll do it again. We're in this limbo where it really does feel like they're making things up week to week and there's no long-term planning. So when we talk about Enzo and Cass, we're like, okay, is there even a long-term plan for this? What are they trying to do? Was this something that they anticipated going on for a few months? Or are they really just flying by the seat of their pants? So if you talk about things looking good on paper and then not winding up being good in the end, it's because that takes, to have a feud play out on TV, to build something to a match, and then to have that match build to another match, and then have that, you have to have every ingredient really needs to land in the recipe. And there's just not enough confidence in the WWE to pull that off nowadays, because you can have a good build and get you excited for a match, but then is that match going to go down right? And is the finish going to come off well? And is that finish meant to lead into something else? There's so much that can go wrong that it rarely goes right these days.
Yeah, and they all just feel like sort of additional episodes of Raw or SmackDown at this point. Like just an extra episode thrown into the week. Because as you mentioned, even with the finishes or the executions, very often the very next night on Raw or in 2 nights on SmackDown for those pay-per-views, they just sort of tweak what they did the night before. So, oftentimes there's really a question of why even watch the pay-per-view if they're just going to sort of undercut or undermine everything they did over the course of that 3-hour broadcast. So, yeah, I think you make a great point. Like, there are often votes of no confidence going into any of these shows, sort of the night of. And you just sort of hope you have your fingers crossed because we like wrestling, and we go, man, please don't fuck this up. And sometimes they're not always up to that challenge.
We're able to dine off so little. Like, we get a good, really great moment, something that really lands well. Like, that's enough to feed us for like 8 months. And that's why, like, in a year of wrestling, you look back and there'll be like 3 or 4 great moments, and that's like enough to keep us going. The rest of it is there's so many empty calorie matches and zero-sum games that come out of these feuds that they don't mean anything. I mean, you look back at, like, I wouldn't say Bray's last year because he actually did things over on SmackDown before getting superstar shakeup over to Raw, but his career has been zero sum. His career has been, I'm going to maybe win the first match and then I'll lose the closeout of the feud, and then I'll just move on to someone else. And that's the way a lot of these wrestlers are, because there's just so much real estate to fill. They have to fill so much time all the time, so they always have to be wrestling, and then it just dilutes the product overall. And that's kind of what you get. And so you get something like Bray versus Seth, which I wasn't excited about heading into because I don't know what they're actually feuding about. I don't know what the angle is here. I don't know why Bray's mad at Seth Rollins or why Seth Rollins is mad at Bray Wyatt. I don't understand what this is about, except that Bray has just chosen Seth to be the guy he boogeyman's right now. Yeah. It's just the target right now. And that's why I thought it was good to sort of, kickoff match notwithstanding, but I thought it was good to open the show with that match because the crowd was still like really hot. This isn't a feud anyone's really excited over, but the crowd was going to be excited for whatever the first match was. And that's why it was going to sort of, if they put these two out like later on, never mind. Like it wouldn't have gone over that well. And it was a good match, and it was kind of long, and I was happy Bray went over. Again, it doesn't mean anything. Either of these guys could have gotten the win.
Yeah, I think you bring up an excellent point as sort of like where the calendar year of wrestling is. It feels like being mediocre at golf, which I am. And you go out and you play like a round, and you're horrible. Like you just have horrible shots. You can't putt, you can't drive, you can't do anything. But then you hit like 5 good shots throughout the rest of the day, and it makes you come back and spend all this money to play golf again. And it doesn't get any better. You just think it might, and that's sort of the epitome of the WWE right now. Is like for every one thing you get that will lure you back, you forget like 17 things that you were just really frustrated with. That's sort of the overall feel of the WWE, I think, at this point in time. Normally where we would jump into the card is we would go to the main event for obvious reasons. But I think we have to start with the ambulance match, I think, for this particular show, and sort of what went down, the aftermath of what went down, and then sort of how it overshadowed like everything on the rest of the show. So, look, the ambulance match, you had Roman Reigns versus Braun Strowman in this sort of long-standing blood feud. These are two guys that apparently truly hate each other. I really can't even go back and source particularly why, other than Braun Strowman just picked the fact that he hates Roman Reigns' face. Like so many other smart fans at this point in time. And the idea of an ambulance match is that you have to beat a person to be so incapacitated, I guess, that you load them into the back of an ambulance and close the door upon them. And when the door closes, the match is over, and the person on the outside of the ambulance, they are the winner. So you had Roman Reigns versus Braun Strowman, and as you mentioned, they've had good efforts before in the ring. Braun Strowman continues to impress me on a weekly basis. This is a guy who started out with like 6 matches to his credit, I think, when he was called up to the main roster of the WWE and being part of the Wyatt family, and has markedly improved every single week he comes out. And he's a freak of nature as he's gotten in better shape. He seems to get quicker. He seems to get a little bit of a better feel for what he's doing in the ring. What was your take going in on Roman Reigns and Braun Strowman?
I was up for them having another match because I really enjoyed I'm not going to remember whatever the Raw pay-per-view was. They were, what was it, right after Mania that Braun beat him clean. And then
all the names blend together at this point.
It didn't have balls the title, that much I know. But that was when you start wondering, like, what is it? How do you get the big dog moniker? And not just how do you get it, how do you keep it? Because once someone beats you, I suppose I would think you're not the big dog anymore. I also would think you're not the big dog if you're not actually the largest dog. So I have, my issues with that moniker aside, Braun beat Roman and clean, and then that's when Roman came back and, quote unquote, injured him and sent him away for a while. And that's kind of what happened here again too, where Braun won clean. So the verbiage, the rhetoric for the ambulance match, which is a strange match in itself because it's essentially just the same as a hearse match or a casket match, is you put the person in the thing. You put the person in the thing and you close the thing and then you win. Whatever that container is just sort of changes. Whether or not that person is actually incapacitated, that's the log line for the match, but I guess it's not a rule because, you could fall into a casket. You could slip on a banana peel. You could do whatever it was that got, Kalisto the win over Braun, those many months ago when he got his feet in the casket and so on, or whatever he had to fall in the dumpster. So you don't have to be incapacitated. You could just slip up and Looney Tunes your way into a win, which is what Braun Strowman did, and he outsmarted Roman. So Roman was not incapacitated when he sort of Wile E. Coyote'd himself into the ambulance and got the doors shut on him. But so Braun won. The ambulance match is strange in its own right just because, it sounds like it sounds wonderful. I mean, you guys are going to beat the hell out of each other, and then the loser gets an instant ambulance ride to medical care. While the loser, I guess, just has to stand there and lick his own wounds. I mean, the winner does.
Yeah. Like the basis for this match is that, Braun Strowman flipped Roman Reigns over in an ambulance, and then Roman Reigns sent Braun Strowman out injured for, I think, like 4 months with an elbow injury. And as a result, this is why everybody needs to go to the hospital, is because they've just beaten the hell out of each other to this point.
Yeah, so this is the second time now that Roman has lost to Braun cleanly, and then decided to come back and just attack him, sort of mercilessly. And this was sort of the edge of Roman Reigns, straddling that line between where they're no longer really presenting him as a babyface at all. He's just is who he is, the guy, the big dog, whatever you want to call him, because he came back and he's like, I'm going to murder Braun Strowman with a vehicle, and I don't care what the consequences are. And this is a more sore loser Roman Reigns, as per, if you're really going to follow his character. He just wasn't done fighting, and he was upset that he lost, and so he's going to ram a truck into to another truck. And then the arena crowd, it really hurt because anything that goes on backstage is never really going to go over the way it does at home, because you're not going to get the commentary. You're just going to watch things replay silently on a Jumbotron over and over again, which is sort of what happened. And then you got to wonder why Heath Slater and Kurt Hawkins are out, and why you're not getting Finn Balor versus the Drifter and all that stuff. So it just sort of is a momentum killer in the house. I don't know what it was like at home.
I mean, yeah, I've been in the house before when those backstage segments or backstage fights or pre-tapes sort of happen. And yeah, because you're just watching TV when you're there. And you didn't pay all that money to get in your seat and watch the same thing that people are watching home on a screen. So in that way, it's kind of a jip. Because yeah, it's not, it's not happening right in front of you. It's not like they and for obvious reasons they can't, but it's not like they crash an ambulance into a semi-truck right out in the arena and everybody's like, oh my God, look at that. That's amazing. Instead they're just like, just watching it on TV. Less impressive that way.
The more replays you get of it too is also the fewer replays I believe the better. I know the WWE's, that's not the WWE's rule for anything because replays are part of the game, but the more you watch it, the more you're like, that probably didn't hurt that much. It's loud and impressive at first, but the more you see it, you're more like, okay, well, if Braun was just over here, he's probably fine. So the less is more in this case.
Well, yeah, and the sensationalism of it kind of kills it. If this guy is seriously injured, and to the point where you need the fire truck to come out and use the jaws of life, like fire rescue to come out and jaws of life this guy out of a mangled ambulance, you wouldn't think that they would show it repeatedly if you really want to get that over, that this guy is in danger. And you know what? And to your point too, Roman Reigns right now is sort of a guy without an identity, because they keep trying to like present him in this sort of babyface way. He's sort of veering a little bit more, but they haven't fully pushed him all the way over to maybe go heel. You know, he has a little bit more attitude than he had before, sort of coming off the win against The Undertaker at WrestleMania. But they still sort of present him as a babyface, in just in the way that he's portrayed, and the people they still match him up against, and the matches that he still has. And in this entire feud, everyone has been behind Braun Strowman. They were behind Braun Strowman when he flipped Roman Reigns in the ambulance. They're behind Braun Strowman when Roman Reigns injures him. They're behind Braun Strowman now in an ambulance match. Everything that they've done as far as booking this has brought sympathy towards Braun Strowman and sort of douchebaggery to hang around the neck of Roman Reigns.
So I would disagree with the fact that Roman Reigns is sort of without a character, unformed. I would stick that on Seth Rollins. I think he has the harder time figuring out who his character is as a babyface at this point. But I think Roman Reigns has a character, and that is he is an asshole. I mean, he is, and he's not. I think what's going on too is that he isn't a likable asshole, because you can totally be an asshole and be a babyface. I mean, you can do the Steve Austin run. There are so many instances of babyface. Babyfaces, for the most part, are giant dicks, and it's just they have the crowd on their side. If you look at what they do and how they, their tactics, aside from the fact that they might run out and make a save on their friend every once in a while, there's not a lot going on that makes them a hero. Roman Reigns is a unlikable asshole, and there's nothing he does that is a baby face. I think there's also the difference between being around a long time like Undertaker, getting nicknames, well-deserved nicknames as a veteran, as a locker room leader, that people place upon you, like the big dog, like something like that. And it's another thing to say, I'm the captain now, I'm the big dog. Like, call yourself that. He is, and he'll, they did it when he's like, I'm not a good guy, I'm not a bad guy, I'm the guy. That's it. He's the guy. So he is, it's weird that he's presented and packaged like a babyface, because nothing he does is babyface. I wouldn't say this. I'd say he also isn't a full heel, but he still, his actions are more heel than they are babyface.
Oh no, his actions are totally more heel than everything he does. Reeks of asshole, and yet when they continue to trot him out there, like they trot him out there in a way that like kids cheer for him, as if he's non-heroic in anything that he does. He's totally a despicable human being in just about everything he does. And yet that's sort of where I say he feels like a guy without a character, because he's not really I wouldn't even say traditional babyface, because as you mentioned, he doesn't really do anything babyface at all. But they also don't want to make him a heel, even though he does heel things. So he's sort of in this character limbo of like no one really knows what to make of him. And as a result, that's, I think, partially why you always have such a divided audience when it comes to him, because his role is not very clearly defined.
He doesn't involve himself in anything, and his storylines only involve himself and what he wants. He's never in a backstage segment with other wrestlers, with the authority or whoever's in charge. He's never talking to, whoever is kayfabe booking. He just comes out and does his own thing, and he's sort of this island unto himself. And again, he's not running out and saving anyone who's getting, ambushed. He's not. He's just like this separate part of whatever show he's on, and whatever feud he's doing, that's what he wants to do. I mean, he's always going after the title. That's always his main objective. And I think it's hurt him. That's the thing. We could talk about the main event too, where I was just happy that the Universal title was being defended. But Raw has also been suffering post-Mania because of Brock Lesnar and the sort of non-presence of the Universal title, which is still a new title that sort of needs people back behind it. That's a reason why I'm, right now hoping Roman actually wins it at SummerSlam just so it's a present title on the show. But yeah, Roman, he's a conundrum. I hate him. I will boo him. I will boo his mother. I don't care. He's unlikable, and it's not. You could say, oh, that's just what smart fans do, and they don't like him because he's being shoved down my throat. I don't think he's being shoved down my throat. I just think he's an unlikable presence. And I'm not going to say he puts on bad matches either, because he can put on great matches. He's a hard worker. I just don't enjoy him, and I actively root for him to lose. That's part of just being a wrestling fan.
Yeah, but you know what? I think that's a good point, though. Is like there is this sort of disconnect with like who he is. Like there's no emotional investment whatsoever. I've always found there to be a huge problem with him in terms of he doesn't get passionate or emotionally involved in anything. Anything bad that ever happens to him, he sort of shrugs off as if he's too cool for school. Even when he gets injured, he sort of comes back like whatever, no big deal. And that's a hard person to read. And like you said, and that's unlikable because there's nothing there to really root for or cheer for in that respect. You can't really have empathy for somebody who just doesn't give a shit, like ever. And so,
here's a button question for you: did you ever e-fed?
Once upon a time, yes.
Okay, I used to e-fed, and I used to run an e-federation, and sometimes I like to describe guys like Brock or Roman or people who are non-phased by things. They're just really, really bad e-fed players, because you'd run into people who, if they lose a match or if they got attacked or something they planned out didn't work, and it depended on what kind of e-fed you were in, if you were just role play based or if there was some sort of point system. Every fed was different, but you would go up against somebody who was just like, I'm rubber, you're glue, and you couldn't. The idea of that was, even though we were all anonymous people online playing, and you would be, have some sort of friendships, you were still creating storylines. And if someone attacked you, you weren't going to show up in your promo next week and no sell it.
Yeah.
Or you weren't going to. No. And it's like somebody would always come off and say like, there was that whole like, well, that didn't hurt. That sort of philosophy behind it. So you get someone like Brock who is so aloof that it's become that his assholery is just, his real life assholery is just sort of blended into his character of being the sort of distant, aloof, above it all champ, to the point where he's so unlikable to me because of that. And Roman's on that level where it's like, you're not, you get someone like Jericho and Miz or people like that who are so detached from who they play on screen that they can be humiliated. They can be, flustered and attacked, and because they know they're playing a character. They're not themselves. And then you've got guys who are sort of themselves, and they don't like to invest that much, and they just come off as sort of bland assholes.
Yeah, I think bland with Roman Reigns is about it. And look, and I'll agree with you. Like, I don't complain about his matches. I've seen him have some stellar outings with, people like AJ Styles. He had a great run with for a while. Even his matches with Lesnar were exciting. But he's just not a guy that you connect with at all. And in this match too, I also find it troublesome because so prior to this match, he has this announcement on Raw that he's challenging for whoever wins the Universal Championship at SummerSlam. This is a proclamation, as if for some reason now the quote-unquote big dog just gets to pick main event matches that he's going to be involved in on the big four pay-per-views. And to your point, he's already lost to Braun Strowman once. Now, in the ambulance match, he's lost to Braun Strowman twice. Not to mention the fact that the Dallas Police Department should probably be looking for this guy who kidnapped and attempted to murder his opponent after the ambulance match. I mean, so he comes out of, we mentioned the sort of lack of incapacitation in the ambulance match. So he misses a spear on Braun Strowman. He spears himself into the ambulance. Braun Strowman closes the door and the match is over. So while Braun Strowman is celebrating his victory, Roman Reigns comes out of the ambulance door furious and super spears him from the ledge of the ambulance, and then proceeds to stick Braun Strowman in the ambulance and drive it away. Kidnapping. Now, he takes him to the backstage area where after a moment where he clearly pauses and thinks about what he is going to do, premeditation, he then backs up this ambulance into a semi with Braun Strowman in the back. Attempted murder. So how is this guy now going to go out and headline a major pay-per-view for you? One, after he's already lost his previous 2 matches, and 2, where he's now basically a criminal.
He also came in third, if you count it like that, in the 5-way. You know what I mean? Finn was going to beat him, but then Joe beat Finn to face Brock. So yeah, he's lost to Braun twice. He came in third. He wasn't even sort of the next runner-up in that 5-way. And it's funny. I don't know. I mean, I don't think the WWE cares about whether or not he comes off as a homicidal maniac at this point, because at least that's sort of a step above asshole. But he remember when Hogan tried to kill Rock
Yes.
Yeah, but then Hogan got cheered at Mania, so it doesn't really matter in the end, I guess. But yeah, I mean, at this point, I know that there's such thing as we know that within the dome of the arena of whatever sort of atrocity is taking place is this understood immunity from the law. Whatever the doors seal on any arena, it doesn't. Whatever happens on the inside, whether it's electrocuting someone's testicles or what was it? Steve Austin dropped the car with Triple H in it.
Yes. Austin also dumped cement in a guy's Corvette.
Yeah. So we know that the law doesn't really extend in there unless someone like Stephanie McMahon calls the cops on you. Then they come in and they'll haul you off.
Yeah.
But other than that, nothing is going to happen. It's just a blood feud at this point. People are just going to continue to boo Roman, and people are going to continue to cheer Braun. And they're ready to pull the trigger on Roman versus Brock early. That was supposedly talk for WrestleMania, but they're doing it. They're going to do it for SummerSlam, according to the rumor mill. So
yeah,
I don't know what storyline motivation they'll have for giving Roman that title shot. I mean, he'll probably have to win another match. They're going to say okay, you don't deserve a title shot, but if you win tonight, you get one. So he'll just win another match, and that'll be it for him.
Yeah. See, now, so moving into sort of the main event, because there was talk about potentially doing Roman Reigns, Brock Lesnar at WrestleMania, which would have been the 3rd year in a row, I believe, at that point, and I don't think anyone really wanted to see that. But so you have to come off of Brock Lesnar's match in the main event against Samoa Joe. So as you mentioned, in between the ambulance and that match, they sort of had this throwaway match of Heath Slater versus Kurt Hawkins, just to sort of, I guess, figure out a way to transition from the ambulance match to the Universal Championship match. As you mentioned, a match that nobody really cared about. They cut away from the finish on the broadcast. They started in the ring, and then the second you started hearing the ambulance sirens and whatnot coming in, they just cut away from it entirely. We heard the bell ring, meaning the match was over, but beyond that, nobody cared. But yeah, so now you move into the main event. You have Samoa Joe versus Brock Lesnar for the Universal Championship. Now, this was a fan dream match for a lot of people because, number one, Brock Lesnar's a legitimate badass. UFC testing aside, when Brock Lesnar gets into the ring, whether it's in an octagon or a WWE ring, there is still the legitimate concern of a shoot happening. That Brock Lesnar is going to hurt someone because Brock Lesnar...
You mean like giving Randy Orton a concussion and busting him open?
Yes. Because, look, Brock Lesnar... He likes hurting people. It's who he is. It's how he's established. It is what it is. And on the other side, Samoa Joe is also a legitimate badass. This is a guy who is trained in multiple martial arts. This is a guy who is a submission specialist. And I don't know that Samoa Joe can necessarily go off and have a career in MMA at this point in time, like CM Punk attempted. But Samoa Joe has enough of a background to make him be a legitimate opponent for Brock Lesnar. And on top of that, the WWE, credit to them, has done a magnificent job of building to this match and making it appear, at least, that Samoa Joe could give Brock Lesnar a run for his money stepping into the ring. So, with all that laid out and probably the 0% chance that Samoa Joe might walk out as the Universal Champion, what were your impressions about Samoa Joe versus Brock Lesnar?
Firstly, on a night full of color, which we didn't kind of expect, like Matt Hardy getting busted open, even Dean Ambrose, and then Braun Strowman being all bloody out of the ambulance. The fact that there was no blood in the Samoa Joe-Brock Lesnar match was very surprising. Even quote-unquote unintentional color. But I was all in for this match. This was the match I wanted to see. I love Samoa Joe so much. And he's such a good dude. He's been working so long. He's put on so much great matches. And just have these wells inside me of resentment for the way he was treated in TNA as far as how much his character devolved from where it started, where they're on the right track with him, a decade ago when he was this undefeated monster, and then that it just slid into oblivion, and he was toiling ever since with whatever they decided their secondary title was, because it changed so often that they never had really any sort of defined championship picture in TNA. But I wanted to see this. Joe did such a great job in making this match. I mean, the writers too, but I kind of wanted Heyman to acknowledge along the way on the road to this match the fact that because Joe was so determined to attack everyone involved with this match, he made it an exciting match. I just want Paul at some point to say, to somehow kind of acknowledge the fact that if the opponent doesn't take it upon themselves to make this match interesting, it won't be interesting, because Brock Lesnar sure as hell isn't going to make a match interesting. On the way to the match, he's not going to do anything to, spice it up other than show up, which, 3 years ago was a big deal, when he was doing his I'm the away champ and I'm going to defend it sporadically. Now, in 2017, we don't need that. That's not what we want. We don't want what we had 3 years ago. He's not the spectacle he was. He's not especially with like I was saying, with the championship so new, you can't have an away championship. Brock Lesnar with the Universal title is not a good fit because we need that belt to mean something. It's not even a year old. So the fact that Joe was coming at him from all angles, cheap shotting, whatever you want to call it. There were some cheap shots. I consider an attack from behind a cheap shot. That's fine. If you're face to face, that is not a cheap shot. So they can call it a cheap shot all you want when he headbutted him in the ring. That's not a cheap shot. You are eye to eye, nose to nose, intimate kissing distance. You're going to get a headbutt. So what I kind of liked about it was Brock objects to Joe choking out Heyman, which was a segment I loved. Then said, if you want the fight, take it to me. Brock takes it to him, and he's sort of like, wait a minute. Cheap shot. But I love this match. It's a sad state, again, when we go into each Brock Lesnar match thinking, you mentioned that there's sort of a shoot element, like is someone going to get legitimately hurt or cut open? And that's sort of kind of exciting. But there's also that element of like, is Brock going to be a shithead? Like, is he going to show up? Like mentally? Like, is he going to want to do something? And I think I was excited for this match too because of the brawls, because he got attacked from behind and choked, that it made me feel like, okay, he's going to show up for this. I think he's invested in facing Samoa Joe because he's so temperamental. You don't know what's going to happen.
I think the only time he never really showed up was that Ambrose match at WrestleMania.
I don't know. I don't think he kind of showed up for Orton either, but I didn't either.
Well, that's also because I don't think anybody really cared about that. It was such a weird dynamic as far as like, why would Randy Orton be the guy that Brock Lesnar faced at this major pay-per-view.
Yeah, there was nothing there. It was arbitrarily put together.
It was totally just like cooked up to try and build the match, but there was no real investment to it. But he sold Goldberg the times that he fought him. So credit to him on that one, and even in here too, the thing about this match, and look, I'll disagree with you in that I still think that Brock Lesnar is an attraction to watch. And I think that I will agree with you to the point that I think that he is a bad fit for the title because of the fact that he doesn't defend it all the time. Although I don't necessarily know that you need the title defended when you have 16 pay-per-views a year at this point now. I would be okay having a really solid intercontinental feud headlining a pay-per-view, or one of those crazy six-man tag matches that are just really heated. But I also don't know that I want to see Brock Lesnar every single month either. I think there's a specialness to him. When Brock Lesnar comes out for a match, there's still a big fight feel to it that other people don't have attached to them. And so as a result too, you have to find people that you can make legitimate threats to Brock Lesnar, because there's not a lot of people who you feel might be on his level and who can defeat him. Going into this match, they did a magnificent job with Samoa Joe, and to your point, the difference with this build as opposed to what we've seen in other builds is that Samoa Joe took the fight to Brock Lesnar. Usually in the builds to other matches, guys will they'll hit him with his finisher one week, and they're like, oh, look, Brock Lesnar, maybe he won't be able to kick out of the RKO or the attitude adjustment or whatever he's going to get hit with at that point in time. But Samoa Joe took the fight to Brock Lesnar, and not just on one week. He took the fight to him repeatedly. And so as a result, there was a lack of fear in Samoa Joe being in that ring. And the match sort of started out that way. Brock Lesnar came off into the ring and still was sort of casting aside Samoa Joe. And Samoa Joe attacked him from behind. He took him out to the ringside. He put him through the announce table. Once again, he was taking the fight to Brock Lesnar. And even though there was the 0% chance that Samoa Joe was going to win that match, during the match and the way that it was unfolding, creeped up to 5%. There were a part of me watching it that was are they really going to do this? Might they make this call? Because they're making Samoa Joe look really good in this match. And it wasn't a squash. It was competitive. It felt like an MMA fight at times. And for a match that didn't get started until 10:55 on the East Coast, they still managed to pack a whole lot of action into it.
Yeah, the first 30-second flurry when he attacked him from behind and put him through the table, that was everything for me. That was awesome. I hate people, but I was high-fiving people next to me, so it's pretty awesome. Best case scenario for this match was Joe comes out looking great, and he does what Heyman said, Brock Lesnar was going to beat you. He's not going to be the same afterward, but he will beat you. And that's what we were kind of hoping for. You wanted Brock to come out of, you wanted Joe to come out of this built up in his loss. You still want him to come out strong. You want to, and Lesnar's going to retain. And so this was the best case scenario. The inkling, the hope, the dream in the back of my head, like you had, is, what if he wins? Or what if he wins, but Brock retains the title? What if it's sort of a DQ or a count out or something, but he can still win and it will continue on? There are all these possibilities. And like you said, that's the magic of WWE in these moments, is when in wrestling, when you can, during a match, even though you all against all logic and against everything and to be true as far as the booking goes, you start to think maybe. That's the magic, and that's where the sweet spot where it kind of gets us wrestling fans is when it can pull that little layer back and be and make you think for a split second, what if he wins? What? And that's where those are the moments we look for.
You emotionally cash in. You totally forget your thought process just goes out the window, and you just emotionally go on the ride. You go, let's just see where this goes. And yeah, and that's the power of great storytelling, is that you don't think about it anymore. You just let the story unfold. And I thought this was a fantastic story. And so now I have to ask, because of the fact that, now look, there were that place, and you were there, so correct me if I'm wrong. That place seemed to be heavily in favor of Samoa Joe.
Yeah. Because I mean, it's the attraction or not, it's the unlikable factor of Brock Lesnar too. I mean, as far as like, you're going to boo Roman, you're going to boo Brock because they're assholes. I mean, you can still be in awe of Brock, but yeah. And then Joe too. Like, this was I mean, crowds are, we could talk about the split between whatever the Raw crowd is and the house show crowd is, as far as more families go to house shows, and that's where you got to get the people cheering for more people cheering for Roman and Cena. But, these crowds, regardless of what city you're in, to the most part these days, because it used to be like, oh, only if you're in Madison Square Garden or if you're in Philly or something, Chicago, are you going to get crowds that are behind someone like Joe. It's more prevalent now. You're going to go to Dallas. You're going to go all over, and you're going to find these crowds. You're going to find people doing, the delete thing for the Hardys, where in whatever arena you're in. It doesn't matter. So the divide is not as big as it used to be, if it's even there at all anymore, between whatever the smart crowds are or not. But yeah, and I think a lot of people just recognize, just like they've wanted to see someone just take it to Joe the way that take it to Brock the way that Joe has been doing in this build to this feud for a long time. They've been wanting to see someone just attack him from behind, or not wait for him to be announced in the ring, just go at him. And I think there's just something really fun about that, because Brock is supposed to be quote unquote untouchable.
Yeah, so my question with that is that, so we have this really strong build, and now we have this really solid match, and yes, Samoa Joe loses, takes one F5, and the 3 count with him looking at the lights happens, but it was still competitive and exciting. So now we're going to pull the plug on this and go back to the guy that nobody likes, who tried to kill someone and has lost his last 2 matches, challenging the other guy that nobody likes and who isn't around anymore. I don't understand how this is a good idea to head into SummerSlam if that's the call that they're going to make.
Best case scenario for me at this point is that they throw Joe into the match and then make it a triple threat. Because I feel like for Roman at this point, even though he made the challenge, he did the big dog announcement, made the challenge to whoever wins the match. The fact that he lost his match at the pay-per-view means he'll probably have to battle Joe and to see who fights him at SummerSlam, and then go over Joe on Raw, or whatever happens tonight on Raw, or whenever it happens. Because he owes Joe. I mean, Joe's beat him twice now, so it's time for Roman to go over Joe. That could be the way he gets his shot against Brock. Yeah, having him. So you got to go to SummerSlam this year. You got to get a crowd that's really split, with the 2 assholes facing each other. You've got Brock and Roman together in one ring. Yeah, you throw Joe in there, then you'll have the fan favorite. If you can get him in there and keep this storyline going through the summer, keep Joe in the title picture. My one note just for me as a huge Joe fan would have been like, oh, it would have been awesome if he kicked out of the F5 and just it would have taken 2 F5s to beat him. That would have been perfect. I loved it as it was, but that would have been even better. But yeah, I'd love to see Joe stay in the title picture the rest of the summer, have it culminate at SummerSlam, give people someone really solid to cheer in that match, make it a triple threat. But again, though, what does it mean for Braun and Roman too?
Yeah, that's another good point.
That's a feud that still doesn't die. That's still going. They could have it go a year and then pay it off at WrestleMania. These guys go at it so much, and they can take turns to sort of float out of each other's orbit every once in a while, or they get injured, and then they come back and they just still hate each other.
I mean, I don't know where you go next in that feud. Like, it has to be like Roman Reigns versus Braun Strowman in like an actual death match, because I don't understand where do you keep going? You keep escalating this.
I guess the most grim. I mean, now that is gone and all that sort of the death paraphernalia has gone with him. I mean, casket matches were really his deal. I guess he could do a buried alive. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know like where you go from there. Even the Hearst match was still his.
Yeah, it's just strange because like these guys hate each other so much, and they literally now want to kill each other. I don't know how you blow this feud off. Like at some point, you have to get to like an unreachable level and be like, well, I guess this is it.
I think honestly, Kurt Angle could pull a Jack Tunney here and say like, these two cannot be in each other's within 500 yards of each other. Like they will kill each other, and he will like actively put in place some sort of ruling that they have to stay away from each other, which will eventually go away again, so they could face each other once more. But he could do that, like after his reaction last night to what Roman did, he could totally just say, "Okay, you guys are done." Like no more, homicide-ish behavior.
Oh, the Jack Tunney reference. Going back old school to bring in the true great authority figures in WWE.
Yeah, the old president, yeah.
And look, and I think it's interesting because even with Samoa Joe, like Samoa Joe has at least earned fans' respect, but having Samoa Joe and Brock Lesnar and Roman Reigns all on sort of the same level, they're all still three basically like heel characters. And look, Roman Reigns versus Brock Lesnar, I understand that they continue to want to have this match. Putting that match in Brooklyn for SummerSlam is going to be a disaster. It's going to be probably worse than it was at WrestleMania when they did it.
What if Joe was in it?
If Joe is in it, I think you're going to have fans naturally gravitate towards it. But I just still think, because Joe's not a babyface either.
But Joe in that Brooklyn crowd, I think so. Joe's a heel, right? But it fits Joe, and it's more acceptable with Joe, and you could still cheer Joe because of the journey Joe took to get to WWE. Because he was never supposed to, quote unquote, never supposed to be in WWE. All these guys who are now in WWE, who, a couple years ago, it was still unthinkable that they would never wind up here. And the chip on his shoulder. The reason why he attacks, the reason why he's an enforcer, the reason why he doesn't care about whoever's in his way is because this is his opportunity after so long. And so I feel like it's more acceptable for him to do what he does, to injure people, to attack from behind, to do Triple H's bidding or whatever he was months ago. You're going to more readily accept it from him because of the path he had to take to get here, and for the dues he's paid.
No, I agree with you on that point. I think he's the easiest to cheer out of the three. To be perfectly honest, I think he has less baggage that aids in that as well. And look, if that's their idea, is to just sort of sell it as a fight. Like that may be their best course of action, is if you take these three guys and just be like, they're just gonna have a fight, and people will go, okay, I want to see a fight, because if you watch like a UFC bout, there's not necessarily a good guy and a bad guy. You just want a good fight, and as Booker T said like 800,000 times, Great Balls of Fire, styles make fights. Styles make fights. In this case, Styles would make fight. Not AJ Styles, but Styles in terms of the way they wrestle. Samoa Joe, Brock Lesnar, and Roman Reigns would be interesting. I don't know what you do with Braun Strowman at that point in time, but I would like to see this path with Samoa Joe continue and not just be a blow off. Because I think he's earned it. I think he showed the people backstage that he can generate some heat to a feud. I don't necessarily know that he always got that opportunity in NXT. I think this is sort of the best Joe we've seen so far since he's been a part of the WWE machine. And so, yeah, I look forward to. I am curious where they go with him next, and I would look forward to him perhaps now staying in the main event picture, because for the first time in a long time, it felt like they created a new star in their universe, which sounds odd considering Samoa Joe's been around a really long time.
No, yeah, definitely, and that's kind of what you're working for here is making. That's what I hoped for with Ambrose when Brock didn't show up for the match. I wanted that match to make Ambrose, to put him over into a whole new stratosphere in a losing effort. And so we got that at least with Brock here, with Joe versus Brock. So.
Yeah, I mean, speaking of Dean Ambrose, since you bring him up, Dean Ambrose challenged for the Intercontinental Championship on the pay-per-view against The Miz and his Miz-tourage. It felt like nobody cared.
Nobody cared. That was the match. That was the match I actively tuned out of the most. I was trying to tweet something. I wasn't paying attention because I feel like the finishes. I mean, as good as this card felt for me going in, I felt like the finishes were all pretty predictable. Aside from Bray winning, which caught me off guard, I think I had everyone's number as far as who was going to win. Miz was not going to lose this match so soon after getting the Miz-tourage. And then on top of that, we've been watching, aside from Miz taking that WrestleMania break to feud with Cena, we've been watching Miz and Ambrose feud since, I think, December. So it's been a long time. We've watched these two go back and forth. And I also feel like Miz on his last promo about Dean Ambrose really nailed it. And it's kind of hard sometimes when a heel that, you know, and that was the funny thing about the rap battle on SmackDown too. Sometimes when you're allowed to sort of get out a little shooty, you can bury somebody and by being a little too accurate. And I think the fact that when Miz called out the fact that Dean doesn't care and he doesn't really want to succeed, and he doesn't like the fact that he's funny Dean, and he's not a lunatic. He's sort of like an aloof, like uncle who you know, kind of forgets to pick you up from practice. He doesn't care enough about, and he'll say it too. He's like, I just want to fight. I'm going to do my best. He's never been about like, that championship means everything to me, that I'm going to make it, be proud with it again. You know, his character is such that he's so casual that at this point in a feud with Miz, with somebody like the belt means so much to Miz and so little to Dean.
Yeah. And yeah, no, I know. I think you nailed it on that too. And like, you know, and we talked about it in a previous episode too, where like they seem to be moving away from sort of this lunatic fringe thing with Dean Ambrose. And now he's just sort of goofy. You know, like he used to question like whether or not this dude was actually crazy. I mean, like kayfabe style, like whether or not he was actually crazy. And now he's just sort of like strange and just a little bit off. And there's nothing really dangerous about him. Yeah, like he's just sort of like comical to a point. And the thing with the Miz is like, you know, I think you're 100% accurate. Is like it means so much to him. He's really passionate about it. He may not. And look, the Miz, I love the Miz. Okay, but I would never go out and say like the Miz is the best wrestler on the card, or the Miz puts out the best matches on the card. But the Miz makes you want to hate him, and the Miz makes you want to see him lose at times because of his personality. In a lot of ways, he reminds me of the Honky Tonk Man, going like way back, in terms of like the Intercontinental Championship meant everything to him. And plus, like on top of this, Dean Ambrose used to be white hot. You know, when Roman Reigns was out and injured not too a while back, Dean Ambrose was white hot. And Dean Ambrose really could have ascended to something. Let's remember, like Dean Ambrose, it all started falling downhill for Dean Ambrose when he went on the Stone Cold podcast. But like it seems like they also just don't know what to do with Dean Ambrose. Like he should never be allowed near a mid-card title. Every time he's held a mid-card title, it's been a disaster. Whether it was the U.S. title or the Intercontinental Championship, never defended it. No feuds were hot. Nobody cared. And, you know, The Miz at least always seems to have something going or make the most of whatever he's put into. With Dean Ambrose, as you mentioned, like, it always seems very casual. It always seems sort of whatever. And there's not a lot of excitement to anything that he's doing right now.
Yeah, I mean, I think he had a good run for a few months when he was world champ over on SmackDown. And people were, you know, he would get huge pops back then. But yeah, ever since then, until they decide to pull the trigger on a Shield reunion on Raw, there's not much for him at this point.
All right, let's shift to the women and talk about the women's title being on the line with Sasha Banks challenging Alexa Bliss. Look, Sasha Banks, I'm a 100% unapologetic Sasha Banks mark. So when Sasha Banks is in a match or she's on the card, it makes my night. I'm not going to lie. And Alexa Bliss, hey, look, Alexa Bliss is a outstanding heel personality. I still think she needs to be moving upwards with her abilities in the ring. I feel like there's still room for improvement there. But that doesn't mean that she's not a good heel who can generate heat and get people who want to hate her. What were your thoughts going into the Sasha Banks Alexa Bliss match, and how did you like it? How it played out?
I like how it played out because I anticipated Alexa winning, but with a pin. I thought she was going to go over Sasha. So the fact that she retains the belt, Sasha wins, it's going to continue. I like that. This, as far as the combination of the Raw women's roster right now, this is the best pairing because they pretty much, whether intentionally or unintentionally, buried Bayley. And now Sasha's the only other sort of like reasonable feud for Alexa to have. She's the most popular of the baby faces on Raw. And look, it's interesting because Alexa is so small. She's a shrinky dink. She's with boots. She's 5 feet. And for her to pose a legitimate threat and to actually come up with an interesting moveset, the fact that she's a heel works in her favor because a heel doesn't have to do as many dynamic moves or suplexes or anything like that, or make you believe that they can knock you over with a clothesline or something like that. They can kick and stomp and choke and pull and stuff like that, and it fits her. She's never going to be the one to pull off a 5-star move. But also putting her in a feud with Nia Jax, I don't know how that would work. With the size discrepancy, I don't know how it would work except for Alexa constantly moving out of the way and Nia hurting herself.
And plus, Nia Jax isn't exactly the best worker in the ring either.
Right. But the size is just so big that I don't even think that would be a fun match to watch. They'd have to creatively work it so tinker with it so much just to make it sort of a believable encounter that it would wind up being Alexa just escapes with a quick roll up somehow, that feud isn't very interesting. So Sasha versus Alexa is the best thing they've got going right now. I'm a huge Sasha Banks fan. I like that it, I don't care about DQ or count out finishes, especially the fact that because like you said, we get 16 or however many pay-per-views a year. These aren't precious gems. These pay-per-views, the fact that we're all watching it on the network, we're not shelling out $70. These are a commodity just like anything else. So if you can say well, that pay-per-view felt like a Raw. I'm like, okay, well, you're paying $9.99. I'm saying you're getting what you pay for. These aren't meant to be the end-all be-all of wrestling, promotion. So yeah, it ended with a sort of a non-finish. Let things continue on. I don't care. You can't have every match be like that, but it certainly works. I liked it during the New Day Uso match too on the last SmackDown pay-per-view. So I think if you're going to let things continue on, I've been watching wrestling for a long time, and it used to be that most matches I watched wound up with a DQ. It just, the heels would always get disqualified. It happens so often. And now if there's not a clean finish, a lot of people get upset. But, old Horseman matches, so many times when I watched Hogan wrestle, when he was fighting, because he wouldn't go over clean, feuds used to have to last a year or more. He would get heels would always get disqualified so that they can meet again at Madison Square Garden next month. So it's kind of the way it used to be. So I don't mind it.
Yeah, I know. We sort of got reconditioned during the Monday Night Wars, where everything had to have a clean finish, and it doesn't have to be the case. It doesn't always have to be the case, especially with something like this, where you have clearly nothing else going on in your women's division. You have to make this last. And so as a result of that, you have to make Sasha Banks and Alexa Bliss last. So why not have a cheap count-out victory for Alexa? Because that just drives Sasha Banks to keep coming back and challenging for the title, which I'm sure she'll do at SummerSlam, which will be the next pay-per-view that Raw is involved in, I believe. Look, I love Sasha Banks. My only issue I continue to take with sort of the way that Sasha Banks has been directed since the call-up is that Sasha Banks still, to me, works best as a heel. And I don't know that we have still seen the best Sasha Banks that can be offered, because they keep sort of pushing her out as this favorite that fans adore and have gravitated towards. But the reason that fans adored Sasha Banks was because she was so horrible as a heel. And I mean horrible as a compliment. And so it was sort of, playing up the friendship with Bayley, who I agree that's been a debacle for a number of reasons. But yeah, look, Sasha Banks and Alexa Bliss is sort of, that's the corner that they've pushed themselves into to have something credible in the Raw Women's division. I thought the match was fine. The Alexa Bliss double jointed injury fake out made me cringe, as it did the last time when I saw it on SmackDown. I would say, look, I continue to have concerns for Sasha Banks because I love Sasha Banks. She doesn't need to take so many nasty back and knee bumps. She's going to be crippled by the time she's like 33 years old. So just take it easy a little bit. But look, this had some fire. And I also want to throw just a quick thing to, I know you were in the arena, so you didn't get to catch it. But Sasha Banks came out on Raw Talk afterwards, which I stayed through and watched. And Sasha Banks brought a straight-up flamethrower to just torch Alexa Bliss and sort of their real-life beef that's sort of been hanging around the internet a little bit as to what exactly is between them. Why don't they actually like each other? And Sasha Banks legitimately does not like Alexa Bliss. And Raw Talk might as well just be called Shoot Talk at this point, because I think she added another level to this feud that if you watch Raw Talk and they can play up into it, sort of playing the shoot factor, you're going to get something even, I think, more exciting when you get to SummerSlam.
Yeah, I also like that Sasha got fooled by the bendy arm, because
so gross.
because it was over last time she did it, like you said, was on SmackDown, and it's almost like that's a different universe. And so why would Sasha be paying attention to what she can do over there? So they can't do it again now. She's done it on Raw and SmackDown. It'd be maybe in a year or so, but yeah. And you need Sasha in Brooklyn, so this needed to keep going. Yeah.
So a cheap count wins, like. They are what they are. They're a good way for heels to keep you drawing heat by avoiding losing the championships. So yeah, I'm totally okay with that. Let me ask you about Big Cass and Enzo, because these are two guys that I think were just poorly mismanaged since being called up to the main roster. They were popular down in NXT. They came up to the main roster. They got immediately over. And much like they did with the New Day, they just ran this act into the ground. I used to love Enzo and Big Cass. I own 2 Enzo and Big Cass t-shirts. I would not wear them at this point in time. Not just because they split as a tag team, but I found that these two guys grew to be so annoying, like so unbearably annoying, that I wish they would have just scaled it back. And I thought they had still so much more potential as a tag team to go. But as we know, when sort of Vince McMahon likes one of the guys in a tag team, that tag team's not going to hang around too long. We saw it with the Hardys. We saw it with the Rockers. We saw it with Enzo and Big Cass. One guy is held up sort of as the gold standard. And the other guy is Enzo Amore. So going into this match, first, what did you think of the build and the breakup? And then what did you think of this? I can't even call it a contest. This one-on-one squash.
The squash, I wish it hadn't been a squash. And the fact that it was kind of a drawn-out squash, I feel like it was only done so the match wasn't shorter than Enzo's opening promo. Like I feel like it was there was time given to the squash. It was sort of drawn out just so that it wasn't shorter than his whole Frank Sinatra That's Life speech, because that was such a build for him as like a baby face, and then to see him just go into just get obliterated immediately after that. I mean, is that his character now? The guy who talks tough, like he already said, yeah, I do write checks that my mouth does write checks that I can't cash. Is that all he's going to do now is talk big and then lose even bigger? I don't know. I don't know if he's like, we'll see tonight on Raw. Is Cass going to be like, yeah, I put Enzo behind me, and then Enzo jumps out from the side of the screen and attacks him again? Is he going to keep being a thorn in Cass's side, refusing to quit even though he will constantly get mauled by the bear? I don't know. Or is this over and done? I can't tell. I did like the build. Look, I didn't like the first split when it was revealed that Cass had been attacking Enzo backstage. First of all, it was something we all suspected. Second of all, the segment itself was really silly. Why would Kurt Angle call people out if he knew they had already didn't do it? He's like, I'm going to get everyone to the ring. Revival, you're good to go. Like, why go through all this? And then why would Corey Graves sit on this information anyway? And this was also one of those things. Why is it why wasn't any of this handled in the in-between days between Raw? So the whole segment kind of went down a little strange. And at that point, I was like, it's wrong to break them up. The second week, though, when they doubled down on it, I appreciated it a lot more because they actively brought up the fact that they hadn't even won any titles, not even in NXT. And then I think like a lot of people did, that, okay, they could get back together very briefly for a title match, that either Cass would turn on him during the match or after the match if Enzo took the pinfall. You know, if he caused the team to lose again, then Cass would turn on him again. So the fact I got duped, I got suckered in, you know, even though DIY had just done it, the attack on the apron got me, and I was like, all right, I'm in. They really want this to happen. They got to speak their minds again twice. We went through everything that could be said about this was said again, and then more was added to it. So I was in. I guess the question was this going to be a long-running feud? And I guess that the jury's still out on that. I wish it hadn't been a squash match as much as it was. Yeah,
it's really sort of it was really odd sort of the way that this thing played out, because I have just the Enzo Amore shtick has worn sort of thin for me. Like I said, since they've been called up, it was overexposed, and it wasn't fresh anymore. I mean, that's the benefit of sort of being on NXT, where you only have like a segment and maybe you only come out like once every 3 weeks and do something. It still maintains its expiration date. Here, like I'd soured on this for quite some time. So the fact that they had split, like, while I did enjoy them as a tag team and I think they still had a place to go, you know, I was sort of okay with, like, at least I don't have to hear them come out and do 8-minute wandering promos anymore. And sort of the pre-match package for this match was the first time I actually really felt something for Enzo Amore beyond, you know, what his shtick was, because they were able to sort of pull back the shtick, and you sort of got like real Enzo Amore, like talking about like, this is how, you know, we came up together and we did this and we're brothers and whatnot. And it wasn't him just like going into the ring and trying to entertain. It felt a little bit more real and emotional. And then he came to the ring and he cut this long wandering promo based around Frank Sinatra. And at that point, I went right back to giving no shits about Enzo Amore. And then Big Cass came down with this horrible entrance music that couldn't have been more generic if they like planned for it to be more generic. And then, then you had sort of this squash match. So like Enzo Amore gets in zero offense. Any sort of punches or kicks he does get in are like unaffecting because he's gotten his ass kicked this whole time. And so, like just like you said, how is this a feud? Like, can you really have a second match when the first match wasn't even competitive? And if that's the case, like, what does that mean for Enzo Amore? Period. Where does Big Cass go next? Because he doesn't really have a built-in feud or rivalry with anywhere else. So it just felt like odd execution for something that they had sort of been building up over the course of some weeks with their breakup, to then have there be like no fire to the actual physical confrontation when they got into the ring.
Yeah, it was his Frank Sinatra speech was too scripted compared to what we'd just been through, like you said. And part of me was like, I like the real emotion being shown by Enzo during the build in this, and Cass and the tears and so on. But then part of me is also like, well, of course he's crying. He's like, they're being forced to split up and they don't want to, like the tears are genuine, but they're also not kind of like coming from a place of like absolute betrayal. It's like they're being forced to end this run, and they're really close in real life. And so it works because you're going to get the tears that way. But yeah, I wasn't a fan of the way that it kind of all went down at the pay-per-view.
What were your thoughts on the tag team title match? This is the Iron Man tag team match, even though there are multiple mans in the tag team match. So this was 30 minutes. The Hardys versus Cesaro and Sheamus, who are then defending the Raw tag team titles. How'd you feel about the way the Iron Team match, I guess, unfolded and sort of the story it told?
I liked it. The only reservations I had about this match was that, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, I have no idea. Was there supposed to be a Finn Balor match? Was there with the Drifter? Was there supposed to be an R-Truth Goldust match? I don't know what was actually on the official lineup. All I know is that going into this, the stipulation for this match basically is that it's 30 minutes. Like, this is like, we don't know how long any of the other matches are going to be except this one. This one is 30 minutes long, and it's going to take up a chunk of the pay-per-view that was already pretty crowded. So that was like kind of going into that for me. I was like, it's a sort of like an extreme stipulation match, sort of like it's not a cage match. It's not a this, but really it's just a time. It's a time suck too if you're not into it. Like, if you have no investment in the tag scene right now, this was like 30 minutes. But I actually really like this match quite a bit, as far as just, a straight tag team match. There were no table spots. There was nothing else. The final couple minutes were really intense. I liked how they still managed to get it down to, like, Jeff could have made the pin, but he literally only had a second left. And I was rooting for the Bar to go over. I hate the name, but I still don't know why they never went with Cesaro. But I think that the right team won, and I think the unexpected color at the end, the blood on Matt, really added to the final moments too.
See, I found that this was a really interesting booking for an Iron Man match or Iron Team match, because normally what we see in an Iron Man match is like jockeying for falls or trading falls or no falls at all, and sort of just like that race to get to one. Here there were 7 falls in total. So if you're doing your math over the course of 30 minutes, that's a lot of falls on an average with your time. For 2 teams that are supposed to be like the height of the tag team division, it's a lot of pinfalls they're giving up over the course of 30 minutes. But I thought that the comeback setup made this match really interesting and different, because Cesaro, or I'll just borrow your name, Cesaro went up 2 falls to none, which put the Hardys in the hole. And that created drama for them to have to come back as the clock is ticking. So I thought the way this match happened as sort of this instant beat the clock drama made it more exciting than it might have been if they were just sort of trading falls back and forth throughout. Here you had a sense of urgency. You had a quickness. The Hardys needed to move in order to sort of get back into this match. And I thought that made it more exciting. I still want to see the Broken Hardys come to the WWE, even though, as we've discussed previously on the show, in the WWE's hands, maybe once it happens, we don't want it anymore. But I think that there's got to be something added to the Hardys at this point, because just sort of playing off the nostalgia of what they were like 20 years ago, the Dudleys are sort of the cautionary tale as far as how that worked out in the WWE. And while the Hardys are still exciting as far as the styles that they wrestle with, it's going to be a harder sell over time to have like 40-year-old guys like still hanging out like they're at a rave.
Well, it's hard because the Hardys really had no personality to begin with, even when they were huge and on top back at the turn of the century. But like what they excelled in were ladder matches and table matches and stuff. They were Team Extreme, and they had that name for a reason. And the fact that that's not anything that they can necessarily bring to the table anymore, because everyone does that now.
Yeah,
I mean, they are pioneers, but because of that, it's no longer an attraction. And so without that broken sort of packaging, that really helped them sort of reinvigorate them and rebirth the Hardys. Yeah, they're not much. I mean, you can still root for them now. We're still a few months into their return, so we're not tiring of them quite yet. But the fact that there are rumors that Enzo and Cass were split up because the Hardys were back and were taking that top babyface team slot. It's like, as far as personality-wise, Enzo and Cass were miles ahead of the Hardys, the non-broken Hardys. So yeah, I do kind of hope we get some sort of brokenness to them at some point. I mean, all that happens these days is that Matt sort of sneaks in little phrases here and there. But it's funny, the amount of fans in the crowd who scream delete, delete, and people who want broken Hardys. You'd think that TNA had a lot more viewers than it actually had. I don't know where all the broken Hardy fans are coming from. They must have I feel like a lot of people discovered them after the fact on YouTube, or just tuned in to watch stuff like the Final Deletion, but didn't watch TNA at all. So, because the amount of fans you see for them with that broken persona, you're like, man, how did TNA? Why are they constantly faltering? Well, they're not even TNA anymore. They officially got rebranded.
They are officially Global Force Wrestling, and with their Impact Wrestling show. Yeah. Yeah, I think there are more TNA, or were what was TNA. I think there are more watchers than people will admit, because it's super easy and popular to just shit all over what TNA was doing. But I do think there's also that FOMO aspect of wrestling fans, where like when people are talking about something, they don't want to be the one left out and missing out on it. So I do think a lot of people tuned into the Final Deletion, and that was sort of like their catch up, their remedial Hardy Boys at that point in time. But yeah, I just think you got to keep them fresh, and yeah, like they're not like booming with personality. I mean, Matt's always been the talker, and Jeff's been the crazy one. So if you're gonna keep Matt talking, yeah, he sprinkles in those little nods periodically, but like you might as well go full blown and see what's going to happen with it, because otherwise, I think people are going to tire of him quickly. I
have a good nugget here to close out the podcast.
Yeah, good.
When I'm ready. But this just came in from basically WWE is asking fans if Roman Reigns deserves a Universal title shot following what he did. Roman Reigns proclaimed himself number one contender to whomever won, because it's his yard. I'm sort of yada-yadaing here. However, it's not suddenly coming to first off considering. So, yeah, WWE has asked fans. I wonder if this is in like an online poll or something.
I'm going to vote no. I'm going to find this, and I'm going to vote no. And I advise everyone to find it and vote no.
It said, first off, considering that the big dog failed to overcome Braun Strowman in their hellacious ambulance match, does he deserve an ultimate title opportunity? Moreover, after Reigns took way too far by crashing the ambulance into another vehicle with the monster among men in the back in the aftermath of their contest, it would stand to reason that Raw general manager Kurt Angle would be ready to hold the guy accountable rather than reward him with a title match at the biggest party of the summer. So that will be addressed, whatever the outcome is, but it will be addressed.
Okay. Well, look, there was one other match, but look, it was Bray Wyatt. He won. That was a surprise. I don't think anybody cared though.
Anyway.
Yeah, I don't think anybody cares. Like, does anybody care what Bray Wyatt does at this point? Like, I don't even think people in there care anymore.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it is what it is. It's two guys had a match because they needed to get paid, and that was it. So
It's interesting that they had Seth lose. I guess it's going to continue because he is the cover of 2K18. So,
yeah, they do got to keep his face out there. And look, as we all know, for every one match that Bray Wyatt wins, there's 40 more coming, in which case he's going to lose. So, so don't get your hopes up, Bray Wyatt fans, because this is just how they pull the rug out from under you. Look, Matt, it's been a pleasure, man. Before I let you go, just let everybody know where they could find you out there on the interwebs.
I am at the Matt Fowler on Twitter. I'm at Fowler Matt on Instagram. I'm at Matt B. Fowler on Facebook, and you can see my writing over at IGN.com.
All right, Matt Fowler joined us here on Intelligent Wrestling Conversation to talk about Great Balls of Fire, where he was. So overall, look, good card, bad card, sort of in the middle.
It's usually all these cards fall somewhere in the middle. I was way into the main event, though, so that helped to elevate this one up a bit for me.
All right, so there you go. Matt Fowler. Follow him on IGN and on Twitter at the Matt Fowler. Always a pleasure, man. I appreciate you stopping by.
Thanks for having me on.
All right, well, look, normally this would be the Tom Nix portion of the show, but as I mentioned at the top of the broadcast, Tom Nix has the week off. Tom Nix has been working hard. Tom Nix has been traveling, and Tom Nix needs to sort of recharge and refresh in order to get some good quality new wrestling to go through in order to assign new homework in the weeks ahead. So Tom Nix is off this week. That means we're going to table your homework for this particular episode. So remember, we're talking about Ishii versus Kenny Omega in the finals of the IWGP United States Championship Tournament during the G1 special in USA. So if you haven't watched it already, you're getting an extension. Make sure you watch it for next week. If you have watched it already, make sure you table your notes. We're going to talk about that particular match next week on the podcast. So Ishii versus Omega at the G1 special in USA. Make sure you got it locked into your brain. Exciting match that we're going to discuss next week when Tom returns. So, Tom, we wish you well. Hopefully, you're getting some nice, some raise or some vacay, whatever it is on your week off. Enjoy it. I'm glad to still be putting in all the hard work here on the show. Look, make sure you follow him, though, on Twitter in his absence at the Tom Nix. That's TheTomnix. That's him. And look, follow me on Twitter as well at Infamous Kid. That's KIDD at Infamous Kid for all my random ramblings and musings and plenty of talk about wrestling along the way. And follow this official Twitter handle of the IWC podcast. So at the IWC show, that's at the IWC show for all notifications dealing with intelligent wrestling conversation. Podcasts can be found wherever podcasts can be found that is most convenient for you. So all we ask is that you subscribe to the show, you rate the show, and you comment on the show. Subscribe so all episodes are hand delivered to you. You never miss one on any given week. Rate the podcast so that you let people know that we deserve 5 stars for our 5-star effort, and comment on the podcast so you let people know what you like about the show, why they should be listening to the show as well. It helps us get more new listeners to the podcast. So subscribe, rate, and comment. Just a couple moments for each, and I will greatly appreciate it. And you can do that wherever podcasts are. So iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, TuneIn, Blueberry, SoundCloud, we're everywhere. Pick your favorite, pick the one that is best for you, and subscribe, rate, and comment wherever it is that you get your podcast from. With that said, I'm going to get out of here. I hope you enjoyed Great Balls of Fire. My thanks to my guest, Matt Fowler, and Tom Nix. Once again, I hope you're having a good time on the week off. I've been your host, Billy Donnelly. This has been Intelligent Wrestling Conversation. We'll be back next week talking more wrestling, because that's what this podcast is about. Have yourself a pleasant, immediate future. I'm out for now. Peace. Intelligent Wrestling Conversation has been a podcast presentation of This Is Infamous.